Makers, I'm Katherine from Minerva, and today let's stitch up the Ninni Culottes from Named Patterns. Now we have put together a kit for you with everything that you need to stitch these up, and I just wanted to go through all of the materials that you're going to need for this.
Okay, so we're going to start with this lovely fabric here. This is a custom print here at Minerva that we have. It is nice and flowy. And of course, you're going to get that paper pattern with the culottes here in all of those sizes. And then, of course, matching Gutermann thread, some needles that you'll need to stitch with, some elastic for the waistband here, and then of course some iron-on interfacing.
And just so you know, I have linked everything down below for you if you wanted to grab this kit or any of these fabrics here. So now that you have all of your materials, the next thing we need to do is prep our pattern pieces. I always like to trace mine out with tracing paper, but you could cut directly into this paper pattern if you wanted to. The next thing that you need to do is cut out your fabric pieces. Pay careful attention to the grain lines in this. And a fun fact with this pattern is it can be used for both a woven as well as a knit fabric, making it extra versatile. So once you have everything all cut out, the next thing to do is to get your sewing machine ready and get stitching. Let's get to it.
Okay, so first we're going to interface some pieces to stabilize them. So both the front and back waistband pieces need to be stabilized. Give it a good press before you put the fusible interfacing on, just to get rid of that crease, because we did cut these pieces on the fold. Be sure to use a pressing cloth. I like to use a silk organza, just because you can see through that pressing cloth. So go ahead and do that for both the front and the back, and I am just going to put this with its pattern piece so I know which one's the front and which is the back. Next, we want to stabilize where we're going to put the pockets. So taking the back pieces of the pants, and we are going to stabilize right in between these notches here. And I cut my strips about 1 inch wide, maybe 3/4 of an inch wide, and extending just past those notches. And then we're just going to fuse those on, and then we're going to grab the front. So you want to do it to both the back and the front pieces of your trousers or culottes here. So next we are going to sew the pockets. So these are inseam pockets here. So we're going to grab the front and back pieces, and we are going to attach the pockets, and we're going to match up those notches, which indicate where we're going to place those pockets. So I am just going to use some clips here just to place this in, and then we are going to sew using our seam allowance on this to get these pockets set in here. And just give them a good stitch, and then I like to serge them as well to finish them, especially with a lightweight fabric. And so then once again, we are going to do that to the back pieces as well, right sides together, making sure those pocket bags are facing downward. So I am just going to stitch these in place here. Make sure to backstitch at the start and end just to secure all of your stitching here. And when it is done, it should look just like so. Then I'm going to start at the top. Now this is important because what we're going to do is we're going to serge only past that pocket piece. So you can see how we went off with the serging on that edge. We don't need to serge all the way down. That will come in another step. And then we are going to press the seam towards the pocket piece, because now we are going to understitch here. So you see we have the seam right here, and it's pressed towards the pocket bag, and then we are going to understitch this to help keep this in place when we are wearing it. So I am just following along here and stitching that seam down. I'll just show you what this looks like on the underside. Okay, so we've done that on all 4 of our pocket pieces. Now we get to do these side seams. So next we're going to place a front to a back, and we're going to place them right sides together, matching up those notches and the pockets, going all the way down. Do not sew a front to a front and a back to a back. You need to sew a front and a back together. Otherwise, your pants are going to be a little wonky. So do be sure to pay particular attention to that as you are stitching this. So once we have everything all clipped in place, then we can go ahead and we can stitch this. We're going to start at the top, go around to the pocket bag, pivot, and then go down to the bottom of the hem. So I am just stitching in here, and I thought I would do this portion a little bit slower. So you can see here, if I turn there, we don't have quite that seam allowance. So I'm going to do a couple more stitches, then I'm going to turn, and it matches with the edge of my presser foot. Now I'm going to continue to stitch along here. So we're just going to do this for both sets here, going down, and then we're going to pivot to get a really nice crisp piece. One of the things to note is you can actually see the seam line where we had stitched before. You want to go beyond that. That way your pocket kind of gets hidden on the inside there. Okay, so now we are back here, and you notice I did not do any serging. We're going to clip these corners here. Now the reason for that is when we serge it, we can then do a straight seam because sergers do not pivot. You cannot turn with a serger. So when you head on over to the overlocker, go ahead and pull that pocket piece so that it becomes straight. So I'm going to show it to you one more time here as I'm coming up on this end. See how it's got that pivot? I'm getting closer. I'm just going to take this and I'm going to turn my fabric so that it is straight. And we'll have a set of chain stitches in between there, which is completely fine with that pocket. And then that pocket piece is also cut on the bias, so it's not going to fray as well where that notch is. So you can see we've got the little chain piece in between there. So this is what your pocket should look like with a chain piece here as well as on this side. And we're going to do that for both sides of our pants. And you can see there's the other side of the pants as well. And you can see the front and the back piece that are stitched together. Now we're going to sew the inseam. So on each set of these front and back pairs, we are going to stitch the inseam, which is a seam that goes right up to the crotch and then down to the hem. So go ahead and clip that in place and then stitch it and then go ahead and serge it. And it should look just like so. And we have the second piece right here. So now we are going to sew the crotch seam. So with this, we are going to turn one of these pairs right side out, and then we are going to place them right side together inside. So I'm putting this in with the hem for the end of the foot inside, and then I'm matching up this crotch seam. And when I match it up, I want one seam to go in one direction and one seam to go in the other direction. We want to nest those seams to help reduce any bulk at that crotch seam. It also helps to lock in that seam so that it matches up absolutely perfectly. And so when you're stitching this, your back should be attached to your back and your front should be attached to your front. And so we're going to stitch this seam and then we are going to overlock it. So I've already stitched it, but this is me over at my overlocker, just serging this seam as well. And once that is all completed, it should look just like so. And then we can take it, turn it right side out, and it's really starting to look like a pair of culottes now. So you can see we've got a very large waistband. It'll be gathered in another step, and we've got our pants. So now we are going to sew that waistband. So we've got our front and our back waistband. So you will notice that the front waistband is actually larger than the back waistband. And we also have those two notches that we transferred from the pattern. So we're just going to measure or clip each of the short seams. We're going to stitch one fully, and then the other one we're going to stitch just past that notch, leaving the bottom open. And so you can see we've left one side open and one was fully stitched. Then we're going to take our pressing hem and we're going to press both of these seams open, paying particular attention to the one that isn't actually stitched all the way down because we don't want it to be any wider or narrower than what that seam allowance would be. So now that we have that, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to get our pressing board out and we are going to press this in half with wrong sides together. So this is how we're going to form that waistband. So you're just going to go all the way around, pressing this in half here. And once we have that all complete, the next step is to attach this to our culottes. So I went ahead and on those side seams, you want to make sure that the flap that has that opening is going to go to the wrong side. So don't match that side up with that seam. So you want to make sure that the seam that we're matching right side to right side on this is not the open end seam. See how I've got the little area that's open, that we want to go to the inside. So I've just found these centers and I'm matching up the side seams. The opening is going to be on one side seam and then the other one is fully stitched on that side seam. And I've also marked my center front and center back, which is the fold of that waistband. Now I am going to pin this or clip this in place, noticing that we're only going to be stitching on here one side. So we've unfolded it. And then we're going to stitch, and then I like to overlock it. It is not required, but it makes things so much crisper and cleaner, as well as providing extra security in your garment to last even longer. Press that seam upwards towards the waistband. So go around the entire waistband and get that pressed nicely in place. Use a bit of steam if you need to. And this really helps to provide a guideline for the next step that we're going to do along the waistband. If you've done any kind of waistband, I think you can guess what this next step is. We are going to fold down the edge. You'll notice that I also overlocked the edge of this waistband because that is the exact seam allowance that we are going to be folding over on the other end. It makes for a nice crisp way to really just mark and press that and really line things up. You don't have to do that, but I find it makes it a lot easier when we are going in and pressing that and lining it up. Because our next step is we're going to line up the fold to just slightly, just a hair over that stitch line. And then we're going to press it in place, which should fall right on that pressing line of when we had pressed it in half before. So it should line up, but just double check and double and triple check as you're doing that, just in case anything was stitched a little wonkily or pressed a little differently. Now, the next part of this is we are going to take pins and we're going to pin from the right side and we're going to stitch in the ditch. So place your pin in the ditch of that seam between the waistband and the culotte bottoms, and then catch the other side of the waistband. Do this all the way around. It should look like this, and all your pins on the other side should catch through. If they don't, readjust how that band is, and you'll notice we have that opening. I like to start and stop my stitching right at that opening area just to make sure that I'm catching everything exactly where it should be. So let's head on over, and this is right where that opening is, and I'm just going to stitch over that opening, and you can see I'm stitching in the ditch. So I'm not stitching on the waistband, and it really does get hidden in there. You can see the stitches are caught all on the inside here, and we have that opening right here, which is where we are going to put our elastic through. So grab your elastic, take it out of the package here, and then measure it to what is comfortable around your waist. So I went ahead and did that. I like to put one safety pin in horizontally to hold the end so it doesn't go through, and then one in vertically or along the same way that I'm going to feed the elastic in. Now, a trick I like to do is I like to draw on my elastic on one side on both ends. That way I ensure that I haven't accidentally twisted it. When you're careful putting it in, you don't really have to worry too much, but it just has another extra added security, because if you've stitched this waistband together and found that it was twisted and you have to unpick that, that is just a nightmare that I do not want to deal with. And it's something that I tend to adopt every time that I add in a waistband elastic like this. So I've brought that in, and I can see that from how I fed it through that it doesn't look to be twisted, but I am just going to go in and I'm going to feel, so you can see that I'm just feeling around just a little bit just to make sure everything is nice. I clipped off the edges of the one side just because it was getting a bit frayed from going through. I'm going to place a couple of pins in, and I'm going to place them in horizontally. And then I'm going to zigzag along one end and then zigzag along the other end. So see where that edge is? And then if I flip it, I zigzagged along the other edge. Nice and secure. And then we're going to get this waistband back into the actual waistband and then stretch it out so everything is evenly distributed. Then next, we are going to top stitch on this. So I'm actually using my cover stitch machine to do this, but you can use just a regular straight stitch and do a couple of lines of stitching. But if you have a cover stitch, it makes for fast work for this. And it gives a nice little detail on the underside as well. So you can see it is a nice stretchy stitch for that. If you stretch your fabric as you're stitching with the straight stitch, you won't have to worry. Now we are going to hem the culottes. So this is super easy. It is just as it sounds. We're going to do a double fold hem. My trick, I like to serge the edges just so it's nice and crisp and gives a nice, good visual guide for when I'm pressing it up. So we're going to press it up once, and I go about double what my overlocker is. The width of that overlocking stitching, and then I'm going to press it over one last time, and I'm going to press all the way around, and this fabric holds a press so incredibly well. You don't even need to use pins. I did not use clips or pins to top stitch this, as you can see. Yes, I am a rebel. If you want, you can also use pins though, just to hold everything securely in place. And stitch with just a single row of stitching along that folded edge. Don't forget to backstitch front and back all of our seams to make sure they're nice and locked. Clip your threads, and you can see our hem is all nice and done and looks absolutely fabulous. And our finished culottes are ready for their final reveal.
And there you have it. Your Ninni culottes are all completed. And if you had any questions at all, do leave them in the comments down below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And if you're new, do consider creating an account here at Minerva. It is completely free to do so and a great place for you to share all of your wonderful makes that you have made as well as sewing progress. And if you want to check me out on Minerva, I can be found at Sheer Stitchery, and I'll link my profile down below. Until next time, makers.